this is not the first time she's been to Thompson. She's been here before, but not in the capacity of the senator. Right. I have a very, very impressive bio, and if I were to read all of it, it takes me 20 minutes, which is the time allotted to Senator Pat. But I'll just send in a few highlights. So Senator Pat's an independent senator, so she is not affiliated with any party. She's an art historian and a gallery professional and a museologist. So Pat is based in Winnipeg. She was the director of the Winnipeg Art Gallery and also the Gallery of Greater Victoria, and that was back in the 1980s to 1999. The Winnipeg employment was much more recent in 1999 to 2004. She's also been the chair of the University of Manitoba, and she served on several boards. There's a whole impressive list here. She's been a recipient of quite a few awards. The 2015 Winnipeg Arts Council Investors Making a Difference Award. She's also got a medal from the Winnipeg's 2002 Women of Distinction for Arts Award. So without saying too much, I'm sure we would like to hear more from Senator Bovey than me. So Senator Bovey, welcome to Thompson and welcome to the chamber.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the podium. I think it's easier for me to see everybody. Raj, thank you so much. And it's a real treat. It's a real honor to be back. As Volker knows, I was back and forth an awful lot, 10, 12 years ago, like sometimes almost every other week. But I'd been here even before then. So northern Manitoba is as much in my psyche as my birthplace, Winnipeg. So I'm really here as a Manitoba senator who knows the province, loves the province, and it's a treat to go around the province. So thank you for the invitation. Volker, thank you for being in touch with me. And Nikki, it's great to see you here. I have to say, we don't see each other much on the Hill, but I do have the pleasure of holding two sweet little baby boys, sometimes on the plane as we fly back to our native Manitoba. So it's nice to see you here. So what I want to do today is really sort of recap some of the Thompson I knew and what we were working on then, some of what I'm doing now, and how these link. I love weaving ideas and situations together. So it was a number of years ago that I was up here with a colleague, Sarah Yates, whom many of you met, when we did the series of feasibility studies and economic impact studies and strategic planning studies for a Northern Aboriginal Arts Centre. And I want to go back to those years just for a second to say the vision of Thompson's community leaders then, the tangible dream of the committee that we were working with, the inspiration of the artists and the craftspeople of the whole northern Manitoba region, and the students, and I was really impressed with R.D. Parker School then, and the teachers and what the work the students were doing, and those elsewhere in the north. And I have to say, everything we saw and everything we heard was really infectious. So it's an honor to be back, and once again looking forward as to where we all can go. I want to begin by acknowledging that the land we're on is a traditional unceded territory of the Cree, Dene, and Oji-Cree peoples. And in saying that, I want to say collectively that I think Canadians are a truly remarkable people, and Canada is enriched by our cultural diversities. Our country is strong, and our nature and landscape and environment is truly spectacular from coast to coast to coast. Our collective responsibility in whatever capacity we work, live and conduct our lives, our collective responsibility is to protect and preserve our environment that sustains us and to deal with the societal issues that we face. And we must do so with respect, with fairness, and with honesty. And we all have a stake in that. But we also have other challenges to which we must rise and find ways by taking positive action in dealing with these current societal problems and in developing a sustainable future. We must ensure collectively that all Canadians, men, women, and children, and all regions of this country, north, south, east, and west, are healthy financially, spiritually, and physically. Or as many dub it, we must ensure that we are self-sufficient. And I'm just back with a number of parliamentary colleagues, both from the House of Commons and from the Senate, from London and Brussels, taking a look at trying to get a sense, shall I say, sort of like jelly. What will the impact of Brexit, if it goes through, be on Canadians? And I came back 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, feeling a little daunted because we think of that as being their problem, and it's very clear to me that it is not wholly their problem, and we're going to have to rise to that challenge in ways I don't think some of us had expected. So to become self-sufficient is a daunting task, but I believe, with what I know of Thompson, that you're a centre that can lead the way on many of these fronts. And I saw some of that this morning with the new UCN campus, which thrilled me. I was absolutely amazed with what I saw and at the Recreation Centre, and I applaud everybody who has made that happen in any way, large or small, and who is guiding it forward. I do believe, and you've shown it, that collaboration and understanding are the essential keys in bringing effective action to heal, to innovate, to build, and to ensure Canada remains strong and a leader among others. So today I want to weave a number of thoughts together which affect my work as a senator, and I think affects this place. I hope I won't use all my time because I really want to receive questions from you and hear from you. My work is only as effective as what I learn on the ground. So for my part, to start out, I want to say it's a real honor to serve Manitobans and all Canadians as a member of the Senate. And some people have said, oh, you're not prepared to be a senator. You were just an art gallery director. And I wasn't sure at first how to answer that. And I very quickly realized that probably being an art gallery director is the most viable training and background to be in the Senate of Canada of anything. Because our job as leading Canadian art galleries was to present social issues, societal issues from multiple viewpoints to multiple audiences all the time. And that's what we do in the Senate of Canada. So our job is basically threefold. The first is to legislate, the second is to represent, and the third is to investigate. And I bet Mr. Martin here knows more about that from school than a lot of us of adults know about the role of the Senate. You know about the Parliament and Senate, don't you? See, he's nodding. So that's great. So we do this, we do our legislation, representation, and investigation in the chamber itself, in our committees, and as individual senators. So for me, what does that mean? First, our legislative responsibility. Every bill that comes to us from the House of Commons or those started in the Senate receives the Senate's full scrutiny. We go through 3 readings as they do in the House of Commons and solid work at each committee. And each bill has a sponsor. So for me, I am or have been sponsoring 2 bills at the moment. One is Bill S-234, a bill to establish a visual artist laureate on Parliament Hill, which was passed in the Senate unanimously and then was sent to the House of Commons. I fear, my Christmas present that I didn't want, is that it's now back with us in the Senate, as it failed in the House of Commons due to a technical vote that required unanimous consent to change the sponsor in the House of Commons. The sponsor was Dan Vandel. He was made a parliamentary secretary, so could no longer sponsor a bill, and the new sponsor did not receive unanimous consent. So it's back with us, and I'm now working with the law clerks of the Senate to see whether we can bring it back in this session, or do we wait till after the election? And I have a conference call on that. That's one of the calls tomorrow, so we'll see what comes out of that. But I honestly think it'll be really important, and I will be introducing it as soon as is possible with the rules of the chamber and as practicable and possible with what's on the plates of both houses. The second bill I'm sponsoring is Bill C-55, a bill to amend the Oceans Act regarding marine protected areas. And you might ask, why is a prairie person sponsoring an oceans bill? And I keep telling everybody, Manitoba has an ocean, right? People just think of the East Coast and the West Coast, and I'm really trying to say, hey, wait, there's a whole northern coast and northern ocean as well. Canada is bound to reach an internationally agreed target of 10% protected areas in our oceans, a commitment made by the previous government and upheld by this government. It's now being studied by the Fisheries and Oceans Committee at the Senate, and we had 2 full-day hearings last week, and we have another couple days coming up. And I want to say I won't be surprised, and Nikki, I'm alerting you, I think it's probably going to come back to you with some amendments. But we're in discussion now, and so we move forward. After the second reading debates in the chamber, all the bills are sent to committee for public consultation through witness testimony of those affected. Groups and citizens are invited to appear before the committees, and you can also request to appear before the committee. So don't wait for an invitation. Get in touch, find out who the clerk is, or get hold of a senator and find out how to get on the list to appear before a Senate committee. That's how we hear from Canadians, or that's one way we hear from Canadians. After the committee review, we go through a clause-by-clause vote on the bill, perhaps recommending amendments, and then it returns to the Senate chamber for third reading. And guess what? The debates begin all over again, and there's summary debates, and those can go on for a while. All that happens before there's a final vote. Sometimes it's a voice vote, and sometimes it's a standing vote. And with the legislation before us in the next few months, I have a feeling we'll have more standing votes than we will have voice votes, but that's just me casting forward as a novice. Representing our regions and Canadians is critical, and that's our second key issue, and all these are equal for me. Manitoba, as you know, has 6 senators, and we each represent the entire province. Some senators from some regions of the country represent a part of the province, but in Manitoba, the 6 of us are the whole province. And this is one reason why I'm really pleased to be back here talking to you today and to listen to concerns, see and listen to concerns in Thompson. As I said, I need to know your concerns, your views, and your dreams, and everything I hear, wherever I may be, informs my work and my participation in debates, my chamber statements, my committee work, and my other work across the country. And I'm doing a fair bit of other things across the country because I'm the first art historian museum person ever in 150 years to be in the Senate. So I feel if my ilk only gets appointed every 150 years, I got 150 years to make up for and 150 years to plan for, so I've only got a few more years to do 300 years worth of work, right? So I'm going hard at it, and that's my choice, right? So my office mantra, just so you know, is that I will see any Manitoban seeking a meeting on any issue as long as my calendar permits. I'll do that here, I'll do it in Ottawa, and as I said, being the first senator from the museum sector, I will see artists and arts organizations from across the country, whatever discipline, again, as time permits. And getting out and speaking today is really important. Investigation is our third responsibility, and that's done at a committee. That's researching and investigating the issues before us. It includes the tremendous work done by the analysts in the Library of Parliament. And they do it for both the House of Commons and for the Senate, and I really applaud their work. I do a lot of research, as do my staff, in bills and issues around me, and some of my longtime colleagues, non-independent colleagues, say, so how do you know how to vote? And I said, well, from my research, from what I hear, from what I know, from what I feel, right? And then I thought, oh no, we independents, we're not told how to vote at all. Nobody gives a suggestion how to vote. We vote with facts and with conscience, and so you'll see us. You don't see the independent senators all voting the same way, and I know there's one issue I'm going to split with them on. I happen to be a believer of guaranteed minimum income, and many people in the Senate aren't, but maybe they don't represent the kinds of regions I represent. We also do our investigation through keeping abreast of news and societal issues and any other matters that come up in our collective work, work that I believe deserves attention. One of the things I'm going to be picking up on, for instance, and you can keep me honest on this one, is opportunities for youth, and particularly opportunities for youth in the arts. And in my office, I have a children's corridor children's art, I do painting nights in my office. So you come to Ottawa and we'll do a painting night. I get kids from around the Capital Regional District and the Senate to come and paint, and I call it the kids' wing. So I think it's really important, and I intend to be writing something about that. I'm also looking right now into the position of Canadian Black visual artists, a sector that I do not think has had fair representation across country. So last week I visited Nigerian-born Manitoba artist Yisi Balaji's studio, and I believe he's one of the key has made key contributions in this area. He has started a foundation for immigrant artists, and he's started a foundation for children, and he's a former member of the Manitoba Arts Council, and I'm really impressed, especially having talked to him about his own background the other day. So what committees and other concerns are my focus? In addition to arts and education, which I'll talk about more in a minute, there are 3 things in particular which I believe link to Thompson and to your achievements, operations, and challenges. The first is my work as Deputy Chair of the Special Committee of the Senate in the Arctic. The second is my work on the Foreign Affairs and International Trade Committee. And the third is a former Deputy Chair and member of the Transport and Communications Committee. And each of these spell opportunities for this community. From my prior work here with Sarah Yates on the Aboriginal Arts Centre, you know I love the North. The North has resonated passionately for years, and when I first read of the flooding of the railway to Churchill, as Nikki knows from the outset, it was an issue that took my attention, and I inaugurated a Senate inquiry into the issue, to which a number of my colleagues spoke. I traveled to Churchill a number of times to assess the situation, asked many questions in person of people from there, of politicians, to cabinet ministers who appeared before the Senate, and others. I was nonstop on this, knowing that the importance of its repair was not only for Churchill, not only for Thompson, but for all the communities along the line, and those citizens north of 60, and indeed for all Canadians. That issue became my baby. From the flooding to the opening 18 months later of the railway again, and every step in between. I took that railway many, many years ago. It was the first time I came to Thompson, long before I met any of you. And when the train was here, walked around the city, and I was smitten at that point. I applaud the consortium of new owners, and the partnerships were developed. I think it was unique in this country, and you all need to be applauded for this. The First Nations, the communities along the line, the larger businesses that made it a reality, and those who fixed the line. Don't think I'm not really proud of the people in Brandon who came up with the technology to fix it. I think it was tremendous. You are integral to servicing the North, and I also know the importance of the line for you, for the development of tourism, for cultural tourism in your regions, for your work as Thompson is the World Wolf Capital, to the strengths of the arts here, and both Indigenous and non-Indigenous. The importance of all that came to the fore while Sarah and I were working on the feasibility and strategic plan for the proposed Aboriginal Arts Centre for Northern Manitoba. I believe, by the way, that idea is still valid, and one which will enhance and the presence and knowledge for Thompson far afield, and provide skill sets for citizens. And in fact, the new UCN has really picked up on some of those thoughts, and I'm going to get to some of those backgrounders. This, of course, links to the arts' importance in every sector of society, and its positive effect on health and well-being, crime prevention, learning, employment. The arts are the 3rd largest employer in this country, and our contributions to the economy are huge. I go on, but suffice it to say, I think it's vital that society realizes that the arts are the glue, north and south, affecting each of the key 8 issues that we all deal with year in and year out. And we have to ensure that that glue's strong and quit siloing the arts, as has happened over the past few years. It doesn't work. It doesn't reach wider societal challenges, and I don't believe sidelining or ghettoizing anything is effective. I think it's counterproductive to creativity, innovation, reality, and growth. Our metrics for measuring impacts, I think, are far too short, because so much of what's in society we measure on monthly statements, on quarterly statements, on annual statements, then they're done. well, you know, some of these things have impacts that are much, much longer. I think we have to find more creative ways of figuring out impacts. So as far as the Visual Artist Laureate Bill when it becomes law, says she positively, I would love to see Thompson artists apply for that 2-year part-time position, which will be, the goal is to reflect what goes on Parliament Hill in both chambers and reflect to citizens in that international language of the visual arts who we are, and what society is dealing with. I'm also looking forward to the establishment of a Canadian Gallery of Identity, a new name for a portrait gallery. It's had tremendous support from the Senate. A Citizens Advisory Committee is in place, and its feasibility study is imminent. In fact, there's a workshop to start that one just next week. I hope this approach to a portrait gallery will become a reality in the not-too-distant future, and it will serve to tie together so many cultural and other organizations in defining who we are and what we are. Again, Thompson has a role in that. Likewise, and equally important, is the Foreign Affairs Committee study on cultural diplomacy, and I'm in the throes of reviewing the first draft of that report now. It was very near and dear to my heart that we do that, because somehow that dropped off the scene. And we have heard from artists, we've heard from organizations, we've heard from people working in all media, we've heard from academics, we've heard from diplomats, we've heard from business. And it's very clear how important cultural diplomacy is as part of Canada's foreign affairs policy. It is our voice and soft power. And you all know, with where the world's at now, maybe the hard power, the guns and nuclear weapons, those aren't the ones we want to employ. What we want to employ is that understanding, that human soul of who we are, and it's arts and culture that define that. Remember when the ties opened up with China those many years ago, it was the Toronto Symphony and the Royal Winnipeg Ballet that traveled there. It was the Royal Winnipeg Ballet that went to Russia at the end of the Cold War. And those were the doors that opened other constructive discussions. You're doing this with the Wolf Capital. And I know you went to England. I know you hit it at a bad time through things beyond your control. But I know there was you had some space at Charing Cross Station. I went to see that space. My daughters live in the UK, so I've been following this track from their perspective as much as a Manitoban. So I want you to keep me in the loop, because I think you've opened a really important door, and you are one of the examples I use as cultural diplomacy. Each of these initiatives, I think, are really important. And I want to come back, and I don't want to belabor it, but I think the concept of the Aboriginal Arts Centre and increasing the skill sets and presentation of Aboriginal art in northern Manitoba is a really valid, viable option towards reconciliation. And Murray Sinclair sits behind me in the chamber, and I've told him, I don't like your word reconciliation. I'm changing it. I call it reconciliation. Let's start putting some of these issues in place, and those that are in place, let's start giving them greater profile. The Northern Heritage Museum, likewise, is really important, and I've talked about the wolf work that you've been doing. The other direct connections between Thompson, the North, and my work in the Senate are at the forefront, too. And I want to talk about the Transport Committee, and you'll laugh. I went on the Transport Committee because I was interested in communications and well aware of the points in Manitoba where the internet didn't really work well because of the dips and valleys. So I was really pleased. I got on there and very happy, and I'm told we're going to study autonomous vehicles. And I thought, jeez, what do I know about autonomous vehicles? I'm hooked. I'm hooked. I went down to San Francisco. I've driven in one with nothing like the Minister of Transport. The former astronaut took the controls, and when we finished, he said, "Were you afraid?" I said, "No, I wasn't. I mean, when you got an astronaut driving you, no, I'm not afraid." I said, "Were you?" He said, "Yes." Anyway, when I was here those many years ago, I went to the winter testing site, and I'm going back this afternoon, right? And I have a question for you. Is that facility testing electric cars? And is that facility testing the impact of autonomous vehicles? The Free Press ran a headline the other day, I guess it was February 9th, that said, "Cold can cut electric car range more than 40%. And that was a Detroit study. And I thought, oh, we need one here. Now, you'll laugh, my car is a 20-year-old car. And everybody says, Pat, when are you going to turn in your car? And I said, well, I want to get an electric car. And I can't in Manitoba, right? It's not viable yet. In the West Coast, they've got plug-in centers everywhere, but they don't around me. There isn't even a plug-in center in my condo building. So I have to wait, right? This 20-year-old car has to last longer. So I'm looking to you for that research. What needs to be done to make those batteries work longer and more efficiently and let us drive further, especially when we're 8 hours from anywhere else, right? And for autonomous vehicles, you know as probably far better than I do that they run because of the lines on the road. Well, how many lines have you seen on a road in Manitoba since the snow started to fall, right? So these things aren't going to work. And yet there's city planners all across North America planning for the changes in their downtowns to accommodate autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles. And when you take a look at health needs of seniors and all, people are really looking forward to these days of autonomous vehicles so that their parents can be taken to doctor's appointments without having to worry about parking and whatever all. And if any of you have had to go to cancer care centers for treatments on a regular basis, you well know the issue of parking. So I thought, gee, that'd be great if you could just be dropped off. So those are some of my questions for later. I have to say I was daunted, as I said, when we started this. And during the sessions, during the testimony, which went on for about a year, I often recalled a call I had with Jason Lucas. Sarah and I hired Jason to do some of the research with artists across the north those 10, 12 years ago. And he phoned me one day and he said, Pat, have you got money in your budget to rent me a car? A truck. I've just bought a new car and I don't want to wreck it on the ice roads. So I said, sure. I thought, I don't care. If we don't have the money in the budget, I'll put the money in the budget, right? I'd never rented a car for ice roads before. And I'm really, one day I want to drive on an ice road. But that stayed with me. And as we were meeting with these developers and academics and all with the autonomous vehicles, I recalled that. And convoys of trucks have to go very tightly together. Well, what I learned working with you, that convoys of trucks on ice roads, they have to have big distances between them. That's not going to work with autonomous vehicles. So if we're talking about finding better ways to deliver goods to the north, I believe we have to figure out how convoys are going to work on ice roads. So there's another challenge that I think only the north can solve. The other thing that's really, and I'm going to speed up and end because I want to have questions from you, is climate change and science research. I believe this is the place with UCN and with the Aboriginal knowledge that's in this community. You're the community that can help Canadians define what that blend is between Western empirical science and Aboriginal knowledge and history. We've got to put those together if we're going to solve some of the issues in the north. And I was on the climate ship last summer and so know it well. And these are the issues that our Arctic Committee is looking at. We're looking at all the issues in the Arctic 360 as they're integrated, not in their little silos. You know, I don't like silos, right? I think we need to poke holes in those silos. And we've traveled across the north, so I'm now trying to tie these together. And I know the Arctic is defined, Churchill's officially part of the definition of the Arctic. And I know it's called the gateway to the Arctic, but I want to say that now that Churchill's defined as part of the Arctic in the work we're doing, I'm calling you the gateway to the north. So I want to link all of you in to that. So I think we're still doing our hearings on that study, learning a great deal of good information, and I hope our report will be done. It has to be done by June. We're a special committee, so we end when this Parliament ends. And I'm going to tell tales out of school. It's my dream that the Arctic Committee will become a standing committee of the Senate. I think the issues are too big, and the North is the future of this country. So with that, I'm going to end with my late husband's mantra. He always used to say, we are all better off when we are all better off. So let's make that better off happen. So thank you. So I want thoughts and questions, please, because my work's only as valid as what you give me. Yep.
I'm pleased to tell you that there is new
Fantastic.
last week, capable of -30, so it's being done.
Good. And as soon as you can talk about it, can you let me know?
It'll have to come from someone else, but-
or can somebody let me know? Because I think this is really, really important to keep the discussions going. And what became very clear to me as we were doing this study, that there are not, how do I say this? No, I'm going to be positive. What needs to happen, the federal government and the provinces and territories must come together with a consistent set of standards in terms of rules and regulations. Because if they change at every provincial border, it's going to make this new vehicle means harder to go from coast to coast to coast. Anybody else? Yeah.
One of the difficulties our province, of course, faces in the whole of the country is that we have 80% of our population situated in Winnipeg.
Yes.
So that government, business, sports, whatever it is, decisions are always made down there. In one way, to me, it's always been a hindrance because we always have to find the protocol or procedure, the authority that comes from somewhere else. And yeah, right now, the North is hurting a little bit. And I noticed when it was last year, I mean, Mark Chipman, due credit, I mean, he put the Jets and the MTS Center kind of together. Then he's got this $400 million downtown Portage Avenue complex, which is great. But these are, again, are examples where, whether it's business or government or entrepreneurs, where Winnipeg benefits. The question is whether it's on a federal level, provincial level, how do we get more attention in the North when we're such a small, isolated community?
Good question. And I've felt this for a long time, and I think, and I'm not going to get into the political arena. You know, you have your MPs who are there on a federal basis. I don't think the fact that 5 out of your 6 Manitoba senators are independent, I'm going to say use us more, because we can give voice in an impartial, apolitical way to these issues that we're trying to grapple with. And I think that's one of the effective things that the Senate can do, and I tried to do with my questions about ice roads, and I bring up the North a lot, and that's exactly what we're trying to look at with the Arctic study. If Canada and the provinces don't pay attention to our North, the divide between North and South is going to become even greater. The economic divides are going to become even greater, and social tensions are going to become even greater, and I think we're at the cusp where we have to start coming up with creative solutions to value everywhere and everything. And, you know, I'm quite shattered that, I guess for me, obviously, you can tell learning is lifelong learning for me, right? I want to say I'm shattered by 2 things in particular that I learned when we were traveling the North. And we went from Kuujjuaq all the way up to Cambridge Bay and into Yellowknife and Whitehorse. We spent a night at Meadowbank Mine, and I think we have to find ways to bring the issues together. How do we live our lives in environmentally better ways? And this is where science and Indigenous knowledge needs to come together. I also was stunned to find that only 1% of Canada's Arctic Ocean is charted by us. The Chinese and the Russians know our ocean bed like you wouldn't believe. Russia has a ship off their coast of the Arctic Ocean. It's a nuclear ship that feeds the energy to the new coastal communities that they're building along the Arctic Ocean. Now you tell me what that's about. And we no longer have that testing center in Churchill, right? That military center in Churchill. Then I find out I was representing Canada again with MPs and a couple of senators at the Arctic Circle in Norway, in Finland in September, I guess it was. And the Chinese, the 8 nations of the Arctic nations were there. And Great Britain, Singapore, and China are official observers. If I told you that I have heard, and I haven't, I've heard it from somebody on the Icelandic Foundation, if I told you that China has been trying to buy a couple of fjords in Iceland So they could be an Arctic nation. What would your thoughts be? Iceland has said no, my informant tells me. Now they're looking at Greenland. So what is our sovereignty, right? And we're at a point where I think the world is fairly fragile in a number of ways. And so if we don't find ways to deal with the security and the health and the safety and the education and the business of the northern part of our country, we're in trouble. So, Volker, I think the time for and of the North has come. I think the policies for the North need to be made by the North, in the North, and for the North. And my job, our jobs, but I'll take ownership of it, is to help that happen, right? To be the facilitator, to open doors, to enable that to happen. And that's one reason I was really excited by what I saw at UCN this morning. And I'm really thrilled, Doug, that you're at all the Manitoba University presidents' meetings, because you are the voice of the North at those meetings, and that hasn't always been the case. So speak up, speak often, and know that when you invite a senator to come up, if it's a Senate invitation to speak about what we're doing and how we can hear, the Senate pays away. There's no money off your nose, right? So I'm going to say use us. Does that make sense? Anything else?
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Not a question, just a comment. I think we're so fortunate to have a senator of Manitoba who's so knowledgeable about the whole province. Most of the senators come out of Winnipeg. A lot of them, I dare say, have never been to Thompson. And I think we're really fortunate to have you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and it's an honor. And I'm really glad that my travels to Churchill and Thompson and my consulting around this province to tiny, tiny communities and the large ones was ongoing long before I went to the Senate. So I'm learning, right? Everywhere I go, I learn. But this is a wonderful province. You know, when I went to school, I went to Grosvenor School in Winnipeg, right? Grade 3. What grade are you in? Okay, so my teacher gave us all a map of Canada, right? You know what a map of Canada is. And she told us to put our pencil on the Winnipeg spot and spell we with a W on one side and the E on the other. So when I was 7 or 8, that's how I learned West and East. Now, I happen to be writing a book in my non-Senate life on Western Canadian art and how it shaped Canadian art as a whole. And one reviewer said to me, well, what are you doing? Just, Manitoba, Alberta, and Saskatchewan? I said, no, Manitoba, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and BC. Well, why BC? That's not West. And I thought, well, that map in grade 3, it was on the W side of the pencil, right? So I think I think about that a lot. And I will say my dad many moons ago taught at the University of Manitoba, and he did a lot of the distance education and went up to Brandon, went up to the Paw, came up here, and went up to Churchill. So it's been, and he was a northern historian, and my first husband was Manitoba archivist, and up as much as he could. So it's in my bones, right? And we did the first studies for the Inuit Art Center. So this isn't new to me. It's a blessing. So thank you. I know everybody's running back to work and all, and I really want to thank you for the opportunity of sharing. But the most important thing about the sharing is that you got to share back to me. I can't talk about what I don't know.